on the video. So yeah, again, my name is Duron Chavis. Um, like Matthew said, we kind of met last year, talking about this participatory budget and stuff. Um, but my work in the city of Richmond is long and uh, I don't know, deep. I'm a native Richmonder from the city of Richmond. I've been an activist in the city since I was 21, years old. I'm 40 this year, so that's like 19 years of activism in the city. I'm the founder of a festival called Happily Natural Day. That's a grassroots African center festival dedicated to holistic health, wellness, and social change. Um, this very Black nationalist oriented, unapologetically Black space of Happily Natural Day is from which all of my activism work has radiated over the last 18 years or so. It's through this space that I was able to connect with people of African ancestry up and down the East Coast, from Atlanta to North Carolina, South Carolina, DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, even Harlem, New York. And relevant to this convo, the first organization that I ever joined was the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League here in Richmond, Virginia, which for those that study like cooperatives and things of that nature, we understand that the UNIA, Marcus Garvey's organization, to have been one of the largest Black mutual aid networks, you know, historically, right? Like in this context of Black people coming together and figuring out ways to create systems for supporting each other. Um, but anyway, I joined that organization when I was like 22, 23 years old. And it took me all over the East Coast, meeting people. And the festival was kind of grounded in that space. I'm gonna try to speed this up, but I want to make sure y'all understand who I am, so all this stuff makes sense. What I mean? It's like I could decontextualize it, but it really makes more sense when you understand who and why we've been doing this. So, Happily Natural Day as a festival has been this liberation zone, so to speak. Every year, it's a summer festival where we do multiple days, bring people from all over the East Coast to be presenters, to be musical guests, craftspeople, vendors, the whole nine, workshop facilitators, all around these ideas of Blackness and breaking down inferiority complexes within the African community, really beating back this whole idea of anti-Blackness that permeates this system that we live within. Um, but during doing the festival, kind of dredged up all of these different activist communities within the Black community all around. And one of those communities, of course, were African American farmers. Um, Early on in the festival, farmers, Black farmers from around the region would come and sell their produce, or they would have value added products, or they would be serving meals and things like that at the event. And one of those farmers in particular became very close to me, a brother by the name of Renard Turner from Gordonsville, Virginia, the owner of Vanguard Ranch. Renard would call me on the phone, and we talk about food security. And at the age of 24, somebody posing a question of what are you going to do if the grocery stores close, was a bit much for my young, father self. I had a 1 year old at the time, and it's like one of those questions, like you're like, yo, I don't know what the hell I would do. And then it happened. We had Hurricane Floyd and Hurricane Gaston in Virginia, and the grocery stores did close. So it became one of those things where we came face to face with food insecurity in real time here in Richmond when Shackled Bottom flooded, and there was parts of Richmond that were literally underwater. You couldn't move from one side of town to the other. Um, but after that, we decided to start working, closely with the farmers. We started doing this program called the Richmond Noir Market, which was basically us serving as a third party aggregator of produce from Black farmers and connecting them to quote unquote food desert communities. I don't even really like the term food desert. We're not, we're trying to erase that from the lexicon. But basically, formerly red line Black communities, we would take the farmer's produce and literally sell it for 20 pounds for $20. Um, we were accepting SNAP benefits and the whole thing. People would pre-order these packs of food, and the farmer would show up with stuff every Saturday for from 2008. No, no, no. Yeah, 2008 to like 2014 when we kind of had to put it down. Um, but that work informed everything else that we've done around urban agriculture in the city, right? Just this understanding of the need for rural and urban connection and interdependence, right? And the need for local foods explicitly around communities of color that have been disproportionately affected by lack of food access. Um, so what has happened is like doing that program for the first 4 years. Every Saturday, I'd be sitting with a farmer, and the farmer, of course, we're gonna have conversation. We talk about food, what, when to grow it, how to grow it, why people grow lawns instead of produce and things like that. Um, and so we decided, we need to start growing food. We need to get involved in this actual food growing practice, because this man was 70 something years old, and I was thinking like, if something happens to him, we this program goes kaput. Um, so anyway, let me fast forward. That's a little bit of my background. I've been doing urban farming since 2012. I've done everything from a community garden to community orchards to indoor farms. I work for Virginia State University. We transformed the YMCA into an indoor farm with aquaponics, hydroponics, solar power on the roof, commercial kitchen in the back. I've worked for public gardens, Lewis Ginter Botanical Garden, done training in community and all that different type of stuff. Um, so, we've been in this conversation from the policy side all the way to the direct action side. But the last 8 months have been crazy. So um, I just want to kind of bring y'all up to speed. What has happened in the last 8 months. When the corona hit, um, we've been involved already in building capacity for communities around urban green space and urban farms and urban gardens. We have been doing that work through the Lewis Ginter space, creating what was considered at that time, a collaborative for collective impact called Beautiful RVA. Um, Beautiful RVA essentially was, or is, I don't know, depends on who's looking at it at the moment, a multi-sectorial collaborative, right? There's all these different white-led organizations, some Black organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, but basically a lot of white organizations coming together and saying, hey, we want to try to be more intentional around ensuring that there's public green space around the Richmond region. And, it was really a great uh, example of what it looks like for organizations across sectors, from municipal government to for-profit and nonprofit, figuring out how they can work together. Lewis Ginter, where I worked at the time, served as the backbone organization for that work. And I think that's important for this conversation, because as we start talking about this solidarity economy work, uh, finding models that create collaborations for collective impact is, I think, is going to be essential. It's going to be critically important for us to figure out how different organizations can be at the table together, right? And figure out ways to share accountability, share responsibility, share mission, you know what I mean? Share evaluation. How do we keep people in the room together, right? Working together collaboratively, and everybody holding a piece of the work. You know what I mean? That's from my vantage point. Without that ties that bind, and an intentional ties that bind, really is none of this will work. But anyway, Lewis Ginter served as the backbone organization for that work, which is a critical decision that needs to be made is like, who's going to help convene the meetings? Matthew, you've been doing that. What I mean? You've been doing these, organizing these calls on a weekly basis. The rest of the folks have been supporting and doing that. Who's going to maintain the communications? Who's doing the emails and things like that? When it came time to apply for funding, grants and things like that, Lewis Ginter took on the role as the organization that would apply for the grants. You know what I mean? As being the fiscal sponsor for this collaborative. Um, but anyway, we had took that beautiful RVA collaborative and created a training program called the Ginter Urban Gardener Training, where we went around the city and developed green spaces with community, not for community. And I think there's a big difference in terms of this type of work. Working with the community looked like, intentional conversations, community conversations, um, training folks from communities, right? And not just training them and setting them on their way, but training them and having money, funding, resources for them to actually do the work that they were trained to do was critical. And over the course of 4 years, or three and a half, almost 4 years with Lewis Ginter, we were able to develop almost 8 different community spaces, across the city. Um, but when COVID hit, uh, you know, I don't know how to say it. It's just everything screeched to a halt. I think everybody kind of experienced that in their own way. But the work that we were doing at the garden in particular screeched to a abrupt stop um, in May. Well, actually in March, because I got the call like the last week in March that I was going to be laid off the next week from the garden, and we were already in the thrust of starting what we were calling the Resiliency Garden Project. When we first got word about the COVID crisis, right, we immediately knew we were going to have to stop the training program, and we weren't going to be able to do the development of the green space in the same way that we had intended on doing. So the decision immediately was, how do we make sure that people are food secure, right? Or at least have some semblance of food security in light of the fact that people were losing their jobs. I don't know if y'all remember, man, but in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, man, people were laying off all from the jump. It wasn't nobody was really like holding back. It was we knew people were going to lose even more jobs, but it was people were reducing hours, reduction in force. Um, so that plus understanding that people were immunocompromised, of people that were immunocompromised and couldn't go in public like they, wanted to. Um, we had to figure out, well, how do these people eat? How do they get, the type of food that they need? And then third, there were food shortages. I don't know if y'all remember the toilet paper runs, but I remember going to the meat section and they having signs up that say you only can get 2 packs of chicken breasts, right? Or 2 packs of beef or whatever, you know what I mean? It was kind of like they were limiting what you could buy, you know what I mean? And that was kind of alarming for at least for me. So we decided to do is that instead of developing one great big green space, we would take the funding that we had and we would split it up and start delivering, building and delivering raised beds directly to people's homes, right? Uh, so that was kind of like reminiscent of that whole victory garden energy that people talk about. But in essence, we were really trying to figure out how do we support folks, not like we're trying to support the war, no stuff like that. I was like, yo, but how do we make sure people can eat healthy or at least have the stress relief that's connected to, the therapy that's connected to gardening and, the whole optimism and hope that's connected to that. How do you create a space where people can, be in this mess, but at the same time feel like, they have some control and agency over their immediate realities of self-determination. So as a form of mutual aid, what we did was create a system for volunteers to go out and pick up wood from the predetermined location, pick up bags of soil, pick up plants, right? And take those materials to someone's house, build the box for that individual, pass them off the plants, and then they be rocking and rolling, good to go. There was we created an online message kind of group board for folks to post questions, and we sent folks resources, tips, and things like that from our blog. But in the process of that, of starting that process, Lewis Ginner, let me go. And then they put this message up on the website, saying that the whole thing was shut down and what have you. And it was just kind of like, wow, this is crazy. So instead of shutting down the entire program, we just, in this whole kind of collaborative space, tapped in with some of our other partners as fiscal sponsors. And we continue, raise money online on Facebook to social media, I think to the tune of almost $97,000 from I think April to shit. It had to been September, maybe October. Yeah, almost $100,000 in like less than 6 months to support this work. And we delivered over 300 raised beds throughout the region. And we were able to purchase all types of equipment, to support, the effort. And, people underestimate how expensive soil is, especially bag soil, wood, nails, gas, moving the materials and all that type of stuff is crazy. But it was great because what we saw through the resiliency garden effort was this culmination of, it was not driven by foundational support. It wasn't like we were out there writing grants to get funded from it. This was really grassroots people from all across our networks, literally putting in $5, $20, $30, you know what I mean? $500, people dropping money in the pot to support this effort and support this work is what allowed us to get all of the materials and get that first wave of 300 boxes out. This is a Google map. It's not the best, but it's kind of like my screenshot of where we were able to deliver stuff. I mean, I was going all the way out to Montpelier, man. People were requesting boxes from far south as Petersburg, Virginia, which is almost 30 minutes away from Richmond. So, we were actually getting requests from Tidewater, Tappahannock. Folks wanting us to come up to Fredericksburg, but we couldn't really build that. We didn't have the capacity to do all that. But it still was fascinating to us to see so much people, so much inquiry, but then also in terms of the amount of volunteers, over 165 people registered as volunteers to support this work. So we had people going out building boxes. We had people at the home uh, uh, growing ceilings. We had people that were basically uh, uh, cutting wood at this at the location. So it was like a real true community effort from across uh, uh, skills and abilities. So then all of a sudden the world erupts. Like we're in the middle of this, and then Richmond explodes. The burnt out bus is endemic. I think it's one of the most iconic. I would say it's a close second with the Robert E. Lee statue. I actually like this one better because I don't like anything about Robert E. Lee. Like everybody like loves the transformation of that space, but I feel like we still kind of giving too much energy to this Confederate dude. But the burnt out bus was visceral. I woke up that morning after the rebellion and went out and took this picture of what happened downtown Richmond, and the whole kind of George Floyd energy took over the city, even down to the Institute for Contemporary Art, which is literally cat a corner from where this picture was taken. On the corner of Belvedere and Broad sits the Institute for Contemporary Art of Virginia Commonwealth University. And VCU as an institution literally has become a city into a city of itself in downtown Richmond. And they were not exempt. They got tagged up too. I don't have any pictures of that, but immediately after that, we got reached out to by the ICA to imagine what this vacant parking lot could be kind of catapulting off of the resiliency garden project that we were already doing. And that ended up uh, manifesting into this garden here that we put in over in August, which says Black Space Matters from the overhead. I couldn't find a good image of that for to show y'all, but essentially this space is an example of what we do, transforming vacant lots into productive spaces that address food justice and climate justice. And then the need for Black people to have actual space is of a paramount importance. But that's been that those are the types of physical practical works that have occurred. Oh yeah. So yeah, this is overhead look at that. But at the same time, the work that has been occurring has been about, how do we get access to land? How do we get access to land tenure? Right. One of the biggest challenges in doing the urban ag work, even beyond like this whole resiliency garden and the delivery of boxes, is literally how do you get space that we can farm in a local or rural fashion, that we have the type of land tenure that's necessary to really actualize a resilient food system. Uh, what that has led us to is the relationship with the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, which I serve as a board member. The Maggie Walker Community Land Trust hasn't been around no more than about like 3, maybe 4 years, but its whole focus is around affordable housing. Um, and the work that I was brought in to do is because of our experience with developing community gardens, urban farms, and all this type of stuff. They asked us to come in and try to help them figure out how do they, also create public green space and also actualize urban agriculture in the city of Richmond. So, you know, this has been an interesting work because as I walked into that space, I wasn't really the affordable housing guy. I mean, I didn't really think that wasn't really my lane. I knew it was important, but everybody's got to have their focus. So, but walking into this community land trust space has really transformed my ideation around how we can develop, how we do community development, or how we can do community development as we identify land that is controlled by community in the realest sense of the word, and at the same time increase access to healthy food and do economic development in ways that are equitable. So what that looks like right now is I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna go forward. So what that looks like right now is the Community Land Trust, the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, is currently looking at property. Um, One of my sisters, a friend of mine, a long-term comrade, Angela Patton of Girls for Change, has had identified 8 acres of land on the border of Chesterfield and Richmond that the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust is currently trying to buy in order to transform that those at least 6 or 7 of those acres into what they call an agri-hood. In a sense, it's like 10 homes that are connected to a farm, that has a farm manager where the food that's grown on that farm serves as an amenity for the residents of that development, and the surplus is sold to the greater community at large. Um, an addendum to that, right? We're also working with the Agrarian Trust, which is a more national nonprofit that's dedicated to acquiring land and preserving, or acquiring land and returning it, or turning it into a public commons, right? This idea of this is public space, but explicitly around farmland. And while you would immediately think that that would just mean like so lots of rural spaces, it actually means rural and urban spaces. So what we're working on right now, or what has evolved, is a collaboration between the Agrarian Trust and the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, where they've partnered up together to create a third entity, which is the Central Virginia Agrarian Commons. This is a new nonprofit that has just recently been filed for in the last 2 months. There's property in Amelia County that's being put into the Central Virginia Agrarian Commons. And this space will serve as that Amelia County property will serve as farmland and affordable housing, land for affordable housing for aspiring farmers that are looking to get started in that work. At the same time, um, the Agrarian Trust and the Central Virginia Agrarian Commons is seeking to purchase land in the city to serve as that urban hub that creates the direct linkage between the rural land, rural farming, and urban markets, right? What the property that we're currently working towards purchasing is the Farm to Family property. Farm to Family is an organization that has been running a CSA for the last 10 years here in the city of Richmond. Their property sits on 1.6 acres on Mechanicsville Turnpike or Route 360. Um, it's literally on the border of Richmond and Henrico. So this property, has a building on it, retail space. There's a greenhouse in the back. The whole idea of this space being upgraded to be a commercial kitchen as well as aggregation space for farmers to be able to pull up, drop their produce off, pick up their money, and that produce be value added or sold directly to the community. At the same time, there's a farm that we've been developing on that space that will serve as an incubator space for aspiring urban farmers that then maybe can graduate over to larger parcels of land that may be out in a more rural area. But being intentional about creating this link between rural farming and urban spaces is really where this work is culminating for us right at this immediate moment. Is once this purchase takes place, and we have the infrastructure in place, it's really about filling in the voids of the people infrastructure, really creating the synergies of around the gaps that people have experienced. The lack of land tenure. B, the lack of space, commercial space that's affordable for value added processing of raw products. Retail space. Like all of those things have been challenges for folks that aspire to address this food access conversation in the inner city. If Black communities had, food hubs in their neighborhoods that were directly linked to Black farmers within 100 miles of the urban community, then we wouldn't be talking about them being a food desert, because there will be supply chains that will be able to meet the needs immediately in those communities. So that plus, all the other stuff we got going on. We're currently building an orchard on a 1 acre space on the south side. That's a city-owned space called Sankofa Community Orchard that we're working on. And this is just some greens that we're growing last year at the Farm to Family space. But yeah, essentially, that's what it's looked like for us over the last 8 months. But just in the bigger macro conversation, tying in the work with the community land trust has been important, because when we're talking about Black space mattering, it's like, without space, without actual land, it's damn near impossible for communities of color to really get a leg up in terms of food resiliency, right? It's like, how are you going to really address the economic opportunities that come along with agriculture without land? We already know Black farmers have lost millions of acres of land due to the discrimination through the USDA and all that different type of stuff. But in this moment right now, like, what can we do to reverse that, create space that could revitalize, bring new young farmers on without them having to be stressed out about not having land tenure? How do we create supply chains for those farmers so that they don't have to be stressed out about farming and trying to find a market for the stuff that they produce? How do we build that infrastructure is really the question. And not only that we've been actively working to resolve that question through the use of these community land trust models. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at. I'm gonna try to stick my landing right there, and we could open it up for discourse. I know I went well over the maybe 20 minutes, but and try to get it all out so that we can have a robust dialogue.
Thank you, Duron. That's great. We really, really appreciate it. And it's like, it's amazing to see the avenues of everything that you've got going on. So does anybody want to kick us off in terms of a question or a thought or a starting point for dialogue?
I have a question. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Barbara. These cross-sectoral collaborative alliances, how is that working through COVID, Sarah?
I didn't hear the question.
You had the cross-sectoral collaborative alliance going, with public, private, nonprofit, everybody sitting at the table. So how's that working now?
How's that working now? Okay, yeah. The beautiful RVA stuff in a post-COVID world. I'm gonna be candid with you, you know what I mean? To be honest, beautiful RVA for me, when I got the way it was set up was that Louis Ginter would serve as the backbone organization for the beautiful RVA collaborative, right? So they had ownership of the website. They did all the work to try to hire out, somebody to do the branding and all that type of stuff. So what I was told is that this was a collectively owned thing, right? And what I anticipated and expected is that even though, COVID occurred, came and really took the precedent, is that platform would exist beyond Louis Ginter's reality of closure and all that different type of stuff. But I was so wrong. I was very disappointed in the garden and the way that they handled, the navigation of beautiful RVA when they decided as an institution to close. Because ideally, the platform could have continued on and do all the things, right? But instead, I got the call on a Wednesday that I would have to, resign or that I would be let go or reduced in force. And then that Friday, I wake up to the message on the website saying that everything was canceled. And then I was locked out of the website. You know what I mean? So when they terminated me, they terminated beautiful RVA too. You know what I mean? So in that space, really while I was living with beautiful RVA as this thing, right? And there was people involved in that space that were invoking it as this thing. Louis Ginter was looking at it in a different way, right? They saw it as something that they owned and held, right? So when they decided to close, they said that they were pausing all community engagement, and that also included the beautiful RVA work. So I haven't touched it. I was like, I'm not even evoking, the name of this stuff because, it feels invalid, you know what I mean, in the way that the garden handled it. Now, the relationships that existed inside of that collaborative have continued though. You know what I mean? So all the different organizations, while they might not be officially underneath the brand that Louis Ginter owns and the website that Louis Ginter owns, the collaborations that existed in that space have continued actively, right? So there's, Groundworks RVA has been a convener or a participant in that space. Numerous community gardens across the city have been active in that space. And even the Ginter Urban Gardeners, the folks that have been trained underneath the program, have continued to do work in communities despite, the lack of that particular brand and, that idea of that collective. So, the interesting part of that question is that in this moment, what could have been in existence is an intentional work of, an organization taking on the backbone role for the collaborative. But, I didn't want to dive on that. It felt like it would have been a real murky space to be like, well, we're going to continue doing Beautiful RVA, even though they've shut down the website and they got this big message saying that nothing is continuing. I just, decided it would be better left alone. And if the garden wanted to revisit that, they're going to have to, address some of the fractures that have occurred in community. So yeah, it's been interesting. You know what I mean? It's just it was very revealing. But I would only say this: collaboratives are only as strong as the bodies that are at the table, right? And even when there's a backbone organization, it's important for that backbone organization to also realize that it is not the sole owner of the collective, right? It's a weird thing that we say collective and we say collaboration, but you don't want to get it confused and have people thinking that you, as that sole organization, is the body. You know what I mean? That's keeping all this stuff together. It requires everybody to kind of be active in their work. So when those spaces where it's like, okay, say for instance, you don't want to be the backbone no more. There's somebody else that could pick it up. You know what I mean? And keep the energy rolling. And I would say that that's probably one of the deficits or one of the weaknesses of that particular effort was that there was no contingency for if Lewis Ginner decided they didn't want to keep it going. That everybody just kind of imagined that this is one of the wealthiest organizations in the city, that their intent was really, deeper than just, their own, whether they were open or not.
Was that a city institution, a public institution, or a private institution or a nonprofit?
Yeah. So of course, Lewis Ginner is a nonprofit botanical garden here in Richmond, Virginia. The collaborative, I'll tell you, in the early stages, there were discussion about whether Beautiful RVA should be its own standalone nonprofit. But there was an intentional decision made to kind of like, for it not to be and for it to live underneath Lewis Ginner in its infancy. I think that it could have been its own nonprofit at some point, but at the same time, I feel like there was a certain benefit for it to live in a space where it was not owned by anybody, right? And that everybody had a role to play in it. It was being kind of like this, I don't even know how you call it. It's like, it's a coalition, right? As a coalition, living in a space where multiple nonprofits fed into it, you know what I mean? Gave it a different type of life where everybody was promoting the Beautiful RVA instead of like, how we know nonprofits go, everybody kind of clamors for the bag. They trying to get the grant, this and that and the third. When that space opened up, everybody kind of saw the potential for that entity to be one through which people could collaborate on a grant together, right? And everybody get broke off whatever they need to get broke off in order to do what it was going to do, and that it would be for the greater good of the ecosystem. It was really intentional for it to live in that space. Like people nurtured it. Like there was, city municipal folks, and there was nonprofits and for-profits. There was people that were in that space that they didn't have a nonprofit. They were like, yo, I'm a landscaper, I'm an arborist, but I'm here because I believe in what y'all doing and I want to support it. So yeah, it was lived in this quasi space where it wasn't officially, it was supposed to be not officially, a nonprofit, but it was also supposed to be this deeper collaboration between all of these entities. And that the most essential piece was that there was an organization that was strong enough to be its backbone, right? That would do the communications, that would manage the website and all that different type of stuff. But COVID tossed everybody for a loop, man. To be honest, it just, I hold no disregard to anybody that and how they respond to this pandemic. It's kind of like nobody ever dealt with anything like this, so you get a pass for even the most egregious kind of F ups as businesses, but it's all good. You know, I think if I had to go back in the beginning, I would have advocated for it to have, you know, stronger MOUs or even partnership agreements from the different organizations that were a part of it, and being intentional about roles and responsibilities of different organizations. Um, you know, hindsight is 2020. You know, in case there's a pandemic, like who, and in case your organization shuts down, like who takes over, you know, the management of the website and all that type of stuff. It's just a little bit more transparent and collaborative. But I will say this though, just to add, you know, as we've been talking about the solidarity economy work, uh, you know, one of the issues with Beautiful RVA too was that it was a very grass tops uh, kind of thing, right? It kind of bubbled up from organizations that had the capacity, right? It was like there's the city folks that are at the table. There's, you know, the larger nonprofits that are doing like watershed stuff, stormwater management that are at the table. And they kind of created that space, right? And then they created the brand and other people kind of fell in line. Um, you know, I would err in a different direction. You know, if I had a chance to recreate it, um, it would be more so an intentionality around grassroots participation from the front end, right? Getting people that are actually, you know what I mean, in communities that experience marginalization, like having representatives from those different communities at the table on the front end to create that and have co-ownership of it would be, you know, the course of action. And so thinking about this solidarity economy work, um, I think it's important to figure out how to frame this work and articulate it to communities that have not been at the table, that might be explaining this type of work in a different way, right? And getting them to understand that this essentially is, you know, a collaboration, you know, but it's a creation of alternative ways of us creating new systems, right? You know, we live in a space where people advocate so much for like reformism and like voting and stuff like that. This is like direct action, but creating systemic opportunities for direct action across regions, right? But it's also important to make sure that, you know, folks that are operating in their region are able to co-create what that system looks like for themselves. And so, you know, for me, I think the easiest way to do it, or one of the easiest ways to do it, is through, you know, community land trusts, right? As you know, because Virginia is, well, Richmond in particular, I don't know about the rest of Virginia, but I know Richmond is dealing with this eviction crisis, and it's about to be a hell of a problem coming up in a couple months. So, you know, creating opportunities for people to have affordable housing um, that is community controlled or community owned, right? And affordable because, you know, we've created a new way of governance, you know, around land uh, that's transparent and that's community facing, I think is critical. And then the second piece is food, man. So, you know, what I learned over the last couple years is that, you know, those uh, you know, very basic fundamentals of shelter and food to eat are the things that are gonna rise to the top when the ish hit the fan. And that's really what we saw, what we've been seeing, what we've seen since the pandemic has occurred, that the reality of food shortages and the reality of people not being able to pay their rent, or, you know, shacking up with other people because they couldn't pay their rent, are the two most critical realities that, you know, citizenry is facing. You know, people talking about $600. You know, people are like, well, I need to take this $600 and pay my, you know, pay that to my mortgage, right? Because my mortgage is behind. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to lose my home, even though there's this moratorium. I know I'm still gonna owe the money. You know what I mean? So let me figure out what I'm gonna do. So, you know, having a method to articulate that and articulate that this work can live in that space of creating systems for people to be able to participate democratically, you know, in the development of food systems, resilient food systems, as well as affordable housing, and common and the generating of a public commons, I think is I don't know. I think that's of uber importance, and I see a lot of opportunity for that. But I also feel like, we're at such a nascent stage in this work. It's like, how do we make sure that the right people are in the room to do that? Is the question of the hour.
Great, everybody. So maybe one more question. We're already coming up on 6. And I think we said we'd go till 6. Anybody else have a question that they want to throw out on the table?
If there's not, I'm eager to go again, but I'll defer.
Well, I have a question for Duron about how we can support your work right now. You just described doing so much for the community this past year. If we were to direct some energy and some attention from other people to support the, solidarity economy and mutual aid work and resiliency garden work and Sankofa, how can we do that?
Oh man, thanks for that, Joe. I would say that the work that we're doing at Sankofa is really, the creation of a space that's explicitly building off this idea of Black space matters, right? So the Sankofa orchard, it's a 1 acre space. So we're planting trees and we're asking people to buy a tree. It's like $100 for a tree, and we're planting all fruit trees in the space. So that's one like very piece of low hanging fruit that people can do and share and ask people to participate in. But beyond that, man, I wrote an article why we should support community land trusts, or what is a community land trust, really just like explaining the origins of that, and like what it can do in community. I think not enough of us know what community land trusts are. I imagine that even when I first heard about it, I was like, well, what? It's a nonprofit that owns land? I don't understand. So, after I did the research and learned more about, SNCC and Shirley and Charles Sherrod and New Communities Incorporated, and even in the work of Cooperation Jackson, in their iterations of using community land trust for food as well as housing, I really feel like this is a way, and it's an accessible way, and it's a way that wealthy folks, realtors, that have a radical kind of like progressive leaning, can also be involved in collaborations with, community in order to address, the housing piece, but at the same time also create urban green space and the whole thing. And I think right now, Kwame Ture talks about, us already having the heart of the people. It's important to be able to catch the minds of the people, so that we can get some action rolling. And I think right now, helping to shift the help raising the consciousness of people about these concepts and solutions that we can activate, is really the work. And I'm, really intentional about trying to figure out ways to do that, whether it's through, now we're doing digital media across everything. It's like, how can we get people on, the call that can talk about community land trusts and agri-hoods and resilient food systems and the rural connection to urban markets and, the economic opportunities around local foods and, all that stuff, that all these ideas that have been percolating around, but are even more real for us right now as we live in this well, I ain't even say post, in this new normal of living in a pandemic, right? So help with that is super important. Like just talking to people about these ideas and pointing them in the direction of these types of spaces where we can discourse about it and try to figure out strategies to implement. There's already people that are working on this stuff, right? So, and there's already resources at the table to make these things happen. But it's like the more eyes on it, the more democratic it becomes. And that's uh, really important to me. I feel like the more eyes on it, the better. I feel like those struggles are important, like different perspectives and different ideas and different conflicts and challenges to the idea help refine it and make it better. So I'm just trying to get people in the room to be like, yo, man, come in, participate and lend your ear and get your hands dirty in this stuff. So buy a tree and then spread the word about the models, man, that are coming out and that are actually happening right here in Richmond. It's like we ain't got to go far. Like the Maggie Walker Land Trust is doing this thing. Like literally, like we just got off the they're talking with the folks in zoning in Chesterfield about this 7 acres and and literally, they already drawn out, they want 10 homes. They got landscape architects working on the layout as we speak. And this is going to be an interesting ride. And it's going to probably take a year to get the money. But once that stuff is in place, sky's the limit, man. I'm really excited about it to see what it can be. Oh, somebody said, how can we buy a tree in the chat? Yeah, let me, yeah, I'll send a link to y'all on the email. It's thenaturalfestival.com is a website, and then you can just click donate. There's a link that, when you go down and select, it's like, plant a tree. You can and that sends money to us, and we can just go and use that to go buy the things. Yeah, so yeah, that's really the crux. And somebody's talking about Harrisonburg in the chat, man. I'll say this, man, like this for us in Richmond, what was critical was the development of a food policy task force. I was participatory in that as well. I didn't say anything about it, but we've been active in the policy world as well as the direct action world. So when in 2000 and I think it was 2008, when the Food Policy Task Force in Richmond started convening, we were at the table, and so the conversations about policies and regulations around urban gardening came up. We helped push the conversation and get, now the city has a community gardening program where you can permit a piece of city park property and turn it into an urban garden. It's essential to figure out ways to talk to your city council people, you know what I mean? Or however your alderman or whatever your county representative, get them in the room to figure out how a food policy or, an urban agriculture task force or rule or some sort of local food access kind of thing can be created so that y'all can hash it out. You know what I mean? Get those people in the room and figure out ways that those recommendations for policy change can come to the table. It works. You know what I mean? Like it's not perfect, dear God. I mean, we're here almost 10, 11 years from the initiation of the food policy task force here in Richmond. And we need to revisit it. Some of the stuff is relevant, some of it's not. And we need more people looking at even the policy. We got a whole list of policy recommendations that we drafted pre-COVID that kind of got that's been chilling on ice because there's been so much other stuff going on. But creating those boards, those policies, those task force to really look at these issues wherever you may be, fusing grassroots community to the city council people to really move those needles. I didn't used to believe in it. I used to be like, man, bump that city council talk. I ain't trying to go there. They ain't trying to hear the people. But then, we started talking to them and stuff started changing. And, even with Matthew talking about the participatory budgeting, like who knew that would even be passed? But damn it's a thing. I mean, it went through, and it was because people advocated to the city council people, and it made sense. So, you know, we got to be as participatory in our democratic processes as possible. And I know people in the community are jaded, but yeah, this is not the time to be jaded. This is the time to make demands. At least my perspective.
Thanks all for all the questions and thoughts and comments. And thanks to Duron again for taking the time to sit down with us, man. It's always great to sit here, just hear how you're imagining things. And there's like, I've got like 4 or 5 different questions that we could have gone on and on with. We'll save it for another time. So to wrap up, so there's a few things I just want to throw at everybody as we wrap up. So just to let you know, the U.S. Solidarity Economy is doing this Solidarity Economy 101 session. It's coming up. It's free. It's a webinar. I'm putting that link in the chat if anybody wants to check that out. Anybody you know that might be interested and was like, I have no idea what this is, and you know, here's a moment to kind of sit down and hear them talk about it. Another cool thing I wanted to share with you all, this just came out, and I know, and Lindsay, you probably know about this. This is an article from Appalachian Voices about some of the work that Chelsea's been doing. And it's very similar. It's like land ownership in southwestern Virginia, and the fact that a lot of absentee owners of land is all absentee, and so they have no desire to actually do anything with it other than sit on it and hope that's valuable for mineral rights. So just a cool thing to see someone else doing some great work and who's been on the call a few times. And then the last thing I wanted to let you know is that I was on a call today with David Ferris. Mapping Our Futures efforts are starting to build. It sounds like things will start off in February for that. And I think a few of you've seen, I'm trying to raise a little bit of money just to support Highlander with that effort. And then for anybody in our group that needs some funds to either cover daycare or food or time away as we start to move that forward. So you'll see that pop up. And for those of you that have helped out with that, thank you so much. We're getting some momentum on that. Yeah, I think that's about it. Does anybody have anything else they want to say or share? Any exciting things, any exciting news? Otherwise, we'll leave it there. And Lindsay, do we want to talk about maybe prepping for the next speaking opportunity? Maybe we can do that via email.
Yeah, I was going to say we don't have one on the calendar yet, but we have a really long list of names brainstormed in that document. So yeah, I can bump it up again in the email, and whether folks that are on the call and already part of this network want to speak on the next call, or whether we want to reach out to someone that's on that list. We can talk about that via email, and I can get that started.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, I mean, if we want to use this time as a moment to like just strategize together, think about something together. I'm always curious to hear more about what everybody is doing, because I'll say the more I learn about solidarity economy, and my perspective is like what's going on in Massachusetts or in South America, and I meet everybody on this call, I'm realizing we're doing it already. It's already around us. And so finding space to be in touch and build those connections is like a crucial piece of this as we move forward. So again, thanks again to Duron. If anybody has any last minute things, we'd happily hear it. Otherwise, we're gonna sign off and we'll be in touch via email about next efforts.
Thank y'all, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That was such an inspiring conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Really was.
Thanks, Duron. Thanks, Matthew.
Yeah. Thank you all. We'll see you
Yeah,
soon.
thanks, y'all. Happy New Year.
You too.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey, Matthew, did you talk to Brandon?
I emailed him, but I haven't heard back from him yet. It's been weird. Like, I'll text him and I'll email him, and then I'll never know what response I get. And then all of a sudden I'll get a response, and then I'll follow up, and then it will be a week or two. He and I have been trying to catch up because I need to sit down and talk to him about efforts in Jackson and some PhD stuff. But it's great to see that, though. I was really excited to see that those conversations are going on. Like, there's a group that a phone call that I've been on with a group in Brazil that's starting up this University of Bom Viver. And that came out of the World Social Forum that was in Barcelona last summer-ish. So it's good to see that conversations are happening. The one thing I will say is that I think Cooperation Jackson's got a little bit of a, there's been some criticality of them because Kali is so like everywhere, and that they need to focus on what's going on in Jackson. So I'm always a little nervous too about kind of asking, them to do work that they've been doing, but I have no idea really where their focus is right now. So, but I'm happy to share that. So,
yeah, that makes sense. And there was discussion in the call about whether contacts, as they were going through the entire list, not just Jackson, was whether to make contacts formally or informally.
Yeah.
And so I volunteered a multiple arm's length informal so that there wouldn't be, so that it would be insulated, so there would be plenty of space for things to move on if they needed to.
Yeah, I'll let you know if I hear from him. Again, too, like I'll say like the network of things that are going on is just like all of a sudden it's like I've got a call with a bunch of academics in a few weeks with U.S. Solidarity Economy, and then I was talking to someone with Symbiosis. It's like every time I turn a corner, there's someone new that has kind of popped up on the radar, and just getting to know people. So, but
that's life in the post-COVID geography.
Yeah. Well, I have to run, so I will see you tomorrow for the training, for the MMT training.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm signed up for tomorrow.
Great.
So.
Okay. I look forward to it. I was hoping that some other folks would come because, well, you'll see. You've kind of seen it already. But
a little bit, but it's always good to go through it.
I wonder if we can drag Daniel to that.
Maybe.
Because he was talking about public banking the other day. So that's what made me think of him. But,
cool.
All right.
Well, I'll see you.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Yep.